Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Welcome back, episode number 27 of Weather Weekly. Glad you could join us here. I'm meteorologist Marcus Bailey with Wish TV in Indianapolis. Glad to have you along here for this week's episode. If you joined last week, we promised that this week was going to focus on, and I can't believe we're going to go ahead and talk about this, but I do think it's an interesting topic. We're going to dive into the early forecast of the winter weather outlook for 2021-2022. This will not be the official forecast. I just want to mention that there are some early ones out there, specifically the Farmer's Almanac. Some people like to ask about that, so we'll dive into that. But I also have some kind of comparisons. There's also a few other well-known meteorologists that have at least put out some types of forecasts here that focus on the winter season. It's fun. If you take this as it's fun to talk about and not try to dive too deep into it, then you know, this is all good. This is good to talk about. And that's why I like kind of jumping in on this a little bit early here. We'll do like an official winter weather forecast as we have in the past with Mike Ryan. He puts a lot of thought into it, but we're not even all the way through summer. And there's a lot of things that kind of have to go into the whole forecast here. So it's more like in the fall when we'll start to kind of talk a little bit more in detail about an official Central Indiana winter weather forecast. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. I do want to get to headlines here. A lot happening nationally and worldwide. It's been very quiet here in Indianapolis, so not a lot to talk about. Finally did cool things down. The humidity dropped over the mid-month here for August, and we need some rain. We're in dire straits for it. We're less than a quarter of an inch for the month, so hopefully we'll get some of those chances. We'll have the forecast coming up at the end of the podcast. Nationally, the tropics, usually I kind of end on the tropics, but that's kind of the headline here. It is really ramped up as we record this here. We're recording this on a Monday. This will drop on a Wednesday, so a lot of this had already happened. But landfall in the United States with a tropical storm, that is Fred, hitting the panhandle of Florida as I am speaking right now, getting hit pretty hard around the Panama City area. And flooding, coastal flooding, obviously going to be a big concern. And state of emergency already is issued for parts of Florida around the panhandle because of Fred making landfall. We also have another storm, Grace. This is moving toward the Greater Antilles Islands, which is kind of a similar area and path, at least early on, for what Fred took. Now, it looks like it's probably going to continue more of a western progression and probably won't have much impact, if any, on the United States. Going to head toward kind of the Texas and Mexico national line later into the week and heading into the weekend. But I think what's of note, and this will be another headline, not necessarily weather related, but it is science related, that Haiti suffered a 7.2 magnitude earthquake just epicentered west of Port-au-Prince. That's the capital of Haiti there. Remember, several years ago, they were rocked with a 7.0 earthquake. This one was a little bit larger, 7.2. And it has been utterly devastating. Unfortunately, fatalities have been reported. Just absolute chaos there. And what they do not need is weather-related issues to hamper the recovery and cleanup efforts. And it looks like that's going to be happening through the midweek here as likely Grace holds as a tropical depression, but you're going to be getting a lot of rain, flooding issues, mudslide issues probably, and some gusty winds that could be rivaling maybe close to tropical storm strength at times. So very active tropics there down in the Gulf, and this is the time of year when we really start to see kind of the action ramp up. We're right in the heart of tropical season in the Atlantic, so we expect things are going to get busy now. New forecasts have already come out that have said that they're kind of re-upping the ante in terms of above average tropical season with more named storms, more major hurricanes, possible more landfalls than average. Not more than last year. Last year was a record-setting year, but more than average as we go over the next couple of months. And that really will be August, September, and then probably into early October when you're really in the prime season for hurricanes down into the south and east. So we'll keep an eye on that. We do anticipate to see probably some more action coming off the coast of Africa. And as we get later into this season, you get into the next month, September, that's when you really start to see more development kind of originating in the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll keep an eye on that. Tropical Depression 8 has already formed too, and that is likely to become Henry here over the coming days. So may have 3 named storms all at once here in short order. So we'll watch that. Wildfires are still devastating the Northwest. It's been pretty rough. California now warning that they may have to have blackouts because of some of the wildfires that continue out there. So just not a good situation. There's been some evacuations taking place in Utah because of some wildfires as well. So just an ugly, ugly scene out toward the Pacific Northwest. So those are kind of the main headlines right now that we're keeping an eye on. And of course, that changes. We'll give you a fresh update on Weather Weekly in next week's podcast. All right, we want to jump right into it. Coming up next, we're talking winter weather, even though we're in the bulk of the summer heat and humidity here in central Indiana. We're going to start looking ahead a little bit to the winter of 2021, 2022. That's coming up next year on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Episode number 27 of Weather Weekly. Glad you're here. And this is for the winter weather lovers. And you know what? I like talking about this. I wouldn't say that winter is my favorite season, but I'm one of those, and I think I've talked about this in prior podcasts before, that man, I'm glad I work in the Midwest because I get real bored real fast with seasons. And we have 4 distinct ones here in central Indiana. And so we're in summer now, and I'm kind of getting to the point I'm like, man, I could use some hoodie type weather, right? I could go for some of those crisp, chilly mornings and just cool afternoons. Maybe a few storms that you typically get into the fall, but maybe you're also throwing a few snowflakes as well. I know a lot of you summer lovers, you're like saying, stop, no, please, we don't want it. I get it. I understand. Everybody has their favorite seasons. Fall is typically my favorite season. But even when I get into fall, and I love it, I kind of get tired of that. And I'm like, let's go. Let's bring on a good snowstorm. And so I'm not at that point yet. But I do like talking about, some of the upcoming seasons here. And obviously, look, meteorology, it's tough. We have a tough enough time trying to forecast 7 or 8 days, let alone trying to forecast 4 to 5 months ahead of schedule. But I do think it's fun if you can kind of get some hints, right? Even this early on, you can get some hints on what may take place. It's always interesting to talk about. Not something that I would probably go on to television and say, oh, here's what we think. Here's what's going on. Here's what they're saying. Because it's going to flip-flop a lot between now and as we go into the latter portions of the fall and gearing up into winter. There's just a lot of things that still have not yet happened that we're just not sure on when we start moving ahead, all right? But I think it is worth a note that many people, maybe not some of these podcast listeners, because if you are listening to this podcast, you are probably a weather geek, and you probably know that the Farmer's Almanac, not always the most dependable or reliable source for a forecast, for a seasonal forecast, right? But we get, you'd be surprised how many people say, well, the Farmer's Almanac says this, the Farmer's Almanac said this. We still get that a lot. And so I think it is worth kind of just looking ahead, if for anything, just for fun. Again, I do not say this is what's going to happen. There's not a lot of scientific measurements that they use in this. And if you want to follow along, you can check this out. You can just go to farmersalmanac.com/extended-forecast. All right. And they have it all out there. And basically, they just kind of paint it out in a big picture for you of the lower 48 states of what's going to happen. And specifically for the Midwest, they have, and this, again, this is where you don't get into real scientific terminology. They say it's icy and flaky. That's it. No other explanation, icy and flaky. All right. If you want to go to some other parts of the country, go to the southeast, quite chilly, mixed bag of precipitation. Down in the southern parts of the country, chilled to the bone, near normal precipitation. That's around Texas. Northern plains, numbs the word, just shoving along. What does that all mean? They do kind of break down. If you scroll down, they will break it down. These are Farmer's Almanac words, not mine. Okay. According to the Farmer's Almanac's time-tested weather formula, there will be snow, but probably not as much as a snow sport enthusiast might dream of. On average, we'll see near normal amounts of the white stuff from coast to coast. However, there will be notable month-to-month variations. So they're still pretty vague. They also do go month to month. January, the cold, hard flakes. Winter's chill will start gradually. In January, temperatures will start out mild for much of the country, but will trend toward colder conditions during the middle to latter portions of the month. But overall, the month will be stormy, especially along the Atlantic seaboard, where an active storm track will lead to a stretch of precipitation in various forms: rain, snow, sleet, and ice. The Great Lakes, Midwest, and Ohio Valley, that's us, will have more than their fair share of cold and flaky weather in January. The Northern Plains and Rockies will also experience Old Man Winter's wrath, with stormy weather accumulating to a possible blizzard later in the month. Let's see. We'll skip ahead to February. I'm not going to hit up all of the other sites here since we specifically kind of focus on the Midwest. Winter Whopper, February's flip-flop forecast. In sharp contrast, February will average out to be much quieter month in terms of storminess across much of the nation. In the eastern third of the country, for example, we calculate that on average, there will be 57% fewer days of measurable precipitation compared to January, a significant drop-off, but that doesn't necessarily mean that storminess will be completely absent. We're forecasting a winter whopper for parts of the Northeast and Ohio Valley toward the end of February. Another atmospheric hemorrhage from the Pacific could lash most of the far west with everything from strong winds to heavy rain or snow. We need to put some ointment on that. Atmospheric hemorrhage. March's lion. March will see close to normal precipitation nationwide, but in a sense, March will be a microcosm of the entire winter. From start to finish, the month will be full of stretches of uneventful weather. But when it turns stormy, the precipitation will come in big doses. For the East and Midwest, for example, a late winter storm will blow in at mid-month, followed by a nor'easter along the East Coast toward month's end. And then kind of just broad stuff on other things. We are raising red flags for potent winter storms for the Great Lakes and the Northeast during the second week of January, the final week of February, and second week of March on account of bouts of heavy snow, rain, and wintry mix of both. A possible blizzard is predicted for the Northern Plains and Rockies near the end of the third week of January. And then temperatures, this is the last thing that they will be saying. What about cold? Winter temperatures are expected to range from near to somewhat below normal across the eastern third of the nation, well below normal for the central U.S. and near normal across the western U.S., especially in February. So if you've been putting off buying those sale long johns or portable hand warmers, you may want to rethink it, especially come March when most parts of the nation will be anxiously awaiting warmer days. The news is not all rosy. They will be few and far between. In fact, around the time of the vernal equinox, so the beginning of spring, which occurs on March 20th, unseasonably cold temperatures may grip many parts of the country. As we mentioned, this winter will be doing a lot of flip-flopping with fluctuating temperatures, and March is no exception. So there you go. Looks like it's going to be snowy. It's going to be relatively chilly for us here in the Midwest. Now, I want to go back to what they originally stated. So I always want to look this up when I put this into contrast here. They started off with, the formula, what they say, of how they come up with their forecast. So again, this comes from the Farmer's Almanac, because I should tell you that the Farmer's Almanac claims that they have 80 to 85% accuracy. More on that in a second. That's coming from them. All right. I have others that actually do checks. Farmer's Almanac says 80 to 85% accuracy. All right. So Farmer's Almanac, how do they predict the weather? Each and every year since 1818, Farmer's Almanac has been offering long-range weather predictions that are amazingly accurate. Again, this is coming from the website. But have you ever wondered how the forecasts are made? In this day and age, when weather is found at the click of a button, the Farmer's Almanac continues to offer a longer-range weather forecast than any other source available. In each edition of the printed Farmer's Almanac, there are 16 months of weather predictions for the continental United States, as well as forecasts for most Canadian provinces. Let's see. Just a little history. The editors of the Farmer Almanac firmly deny using any type of computer satellite tracking equipment, weather lore, or groundhogs. What they will admit is using a specific and reliable set of rules that were developed back in 1818 by astronomer and mathematician David Young, the Almanac's first editor. These rules have been altered slightly and turned into a formula that is both mathematical and astronomical. So here's the formula. I don't think they get too deep into it because they don't want to say everything, but this is how it goes. The formula takes into consideration things like sunspot activity, tidal action of the moon, the position of the planets, and a variety of other factors. The only person who knows the exact formula is the Farmer's Almanac weather prognosticator, who goes by the pseudonym of Caleb Weatherby. To protect this proprietary formula, the editors of the Farmer's Almanac prefer to keep both Caleb's true identity and the formula a closely guarded brand secret. So there you go. Take that for what it's worth. There's actually no meteorological use of anything. No teleconnections like El Nino or La Nina. Nothing in terms of past history, how things have gone. It is solely more astronomical than anything. So there you have it. Now, that being said, I mentioned that the Farmer's Almanac themselves state 80 to 85% accuracy. Tom Skilling, very well-known meteorologist out of WGN in Chicago, Illinois, has a little segment that he has on their website called Ask Tom or Ask Skilling. And there was somebody that posted the question and said, how accurate is the Farmer's Almanac in predicting the weather? So Tom responds back. The Old Farmer's Almanac claims a forecast accuracy of 80 to 85%, but in reality, its forecast accuracy here in the Midwest is on the order of 50 to 52%. The Chicago National Weather Service office, located in Romeoville, creates specific weather forecasts for the metro area 7 days into the future, and those forecasts are updated approximately every 6 hours. Forecast accuracy averaged over a considerable period of time is approximately 80% during the first 3 days of the forecast period. So Yeah, not real high. And that's to be expected. If it's actually 50 to 52%, because we'll give most meteorologists will give the Farmer's Almanac grief. Because it's just, look, if you don't take it seriously, it is a little fun read, right? It's fun to just kind of see what they're talking about, and who doesn't like to hear about the possibility of a snowstorm or whatever. But there are some people that will take it to the bank, right? But if they're just having fun, 50 to 52%, that's not, it's not great, right? If you are trying to be a reliable source, it's not. But considering what they use as a method to predict the weather, 50 to 52% is actually kind of impressive, right? Because there's no meteorological sense to it at all. So 50 to 52%, Farmer's Almanac claims 80 to 85%. Now, just to quickly contrast here. First, what I know, and I don't know a lot, right? That's why I read papers from people that are a whole lot smarter than me. That's why we have Mike Ryan come in at the end of the season here and talk about the forecast. But what we do know is that it will be a La Nina year. La Nina has to do with the temperature of the waters on the equatorial Pacific, which will play a role in our storm track patterns. Usually La Nina, on average, and all of them are different. I'll talk about that in a second. But typically La Nina patterns mean a warmer and wetter winter for us here in the Great Lakes, the Midwest, okay? So there's many more things that you have to take into account as opposed to La Nina taking place. And that's where we bring Mike Ryan in at the end of the year, because you kind of have to look at the whole body of work, basically, leading up to the winter. How temperatures played out during the summer, how precipitation played out through the summer. We were very, very wet early on. Now we're very, very dry. How's that going to play on? Mike likes to use analog years, meaning years that we're going into a certain type of La Nina season like we will be going into this year, whether it be strong or weak or, medium, right in the middle. And similar situations where let's just assume we're going to stay below average in precipitation. All right. I don't know if that's going to happen unless that's just kind of the path we're taking right now. Let's assume we stay below average for the remainder of the summer going into fall. Mike may take into account several dry months leading into a La Nina late fall, early winter. How did that play out in these types of situations? There also could be some weird anomalies, which I'm going to talk about here in just a second, that aren't necessarily La Nina related, but you could have like a warm pool of air near Alaska, or of water, a warm pool of water over near Alaska or in other parts of the world, and that could play a bit of a role in how things kind of play out. All right. So that's why we don't really kind of get down deep into it, because there's a lot happening. And I say that because as I was, working through this podcast here, got an email. I am a subscriber to Weather Bell, which is a well-known in the weather world website for modeling data. And they have a well-known meteorologist. He's been seen on Fox News a lot. He used to previously worked at AccuWeather. His name is Joe Bastardi. Excellent meteorologist explaining at just a lot of things. Very good at explaining long-term patterns. All right. And so he's come out with his 2021-2022 forecast. Okay. Here are just the quick cliff notes. And he also did put this in map form. So he released this on August 9th. But I am just seeing it here on the 16th. Here are his notes. We are expecting a fast start to winter over the east. There is strong analog support from models through midwinter. Overall, the coldest weather should be centered on the Great Lakes. And those are kind of the key points. He's got us in the map here about a degree below average, it looks like. And I'm saying us, Indiana, the entire state, but he mentioned the Great Lakes. And the snow forecast. He's got the northern half of Indiana, all of the Great Lakes states there, northern Ohio, northern Illinois, northern Indiana. And I say northern Indiana, I do include the metro. He's got it sliced right down I-70, essentially. Upstate New York, Michigan, Wisconsin. And much of eastern Minnesota, eastern Iowa, at the percent of normal snowfall at 125%. So that would obviously mean an above average snowfall winter. So some of the things, I'm not going to go through all of these notes. If you want to check this out, go to weatherbell.com. It's on the front page. It says Prelim 2021-22 Winter Outlook, okay? So if you want to dive in deep, I'm not going to spend the entire time talking about this because some of you may be driving, and I don't want to put you to sleep. But there are some interesting things. And this kind of gets into, what I was just mentioning when we talk with Mike Ryan. He usually will throw analog years in to compare. And so Joe Bastardi has done this as well. The analog years that he had was 2003 and 4, 2005 and 6, 2008 and 9, 2017 and 18, and 2020 and 21 to kind of compare. All right. The common theme here was colder than average Mays preceding the period across much of the nation. Okay, so we've had cooler Mays in many of those years. This year also taking into consideration. And high amplitude MGO in the preceding spring, which carried into the hurricane season. Cold phase MGO springs usually have big U.S. impact seasons behind them, and that pattern carries into an early winter correlation. And summer sea surface temperatures and hurricane season activity, which signals the tendency for Greenland blocking in winter, especially early. Now, the problem with that is we haven't had a whole lot of action here as of late in the hurricane season for the Atlantic. It's been a very quiet month and a half. Now it's starting to ramp up. We mentioned that in the headlines. Already 2 storms, possibly 3 within a week's span. Okay? So, something that we'll have to watch there. He gets real in deep on modeling, and I think it is worth a read. If you want to check it out, please do so. He gets very detailed in his method of thinking. So basically, I'm going to skip ahead to his final kind of solution here, okay? So the verdict. Overall, it's a very bullish signal for early winter, and that's kind of been his theme. If you read the entire article, he hits pretty hard that winter may start a little bit earlier. If you think back to a lot of our winters as of late, they've had very late starts. We didn't have snow or really bitter cold temperatures. I remember Halloween being pretty nice this year. Now, I do remember a couple of years ago it was snowing. It was brutally cold. But overall, we didn't flip that switch completely to consistent chill sometimes until, I recall pretty nice Thanksgivings, right? A lot of November being fairly mild. Even into early December, I remember thinking this does not feel like Christmas time, right? So I think there's been very limited times where we've actually had snow on the ground at Christmas. So that's what we mean by an early start. And so Joe Bastardi is, hitting that hard. Overall, very bullish signal for early winter. He said I have left out of the analog some heavy pre-21st century big hitting winters. If those would get into the package, it would seal the deal. There is enough variance and swing, so prepare for bursts of higher than normal wintry weather followed by a backing off. The wintry period will outduel the milder periods for the end, result being a bit snowier than normal. Population weighted with near normal temperatures overall. The antics of the MGO will be huge. Each winter weekly update will be dealing closely with that, as it's a huge driver. Models, unfortunately, are horrible at forecasting it, but I hope you have noticed that since the spring of 2020, we have had skill in hitting what it's up to. The MGO has also been a big help in 1 to 2 month forecasting for everything from summer cooldowns to hotter periods and hurricanes. After seeing last winter and the reinforcing we saw, a valuable lesson was taught, and what I decided to do is start constructing this winter's ideas this past spring. I'm showing you some of the links here, and so the lesson of last year may have given us some knowledge as to how to deal with this year. Obviously, any future event is not etched in stone. Given how bad modeling is, I should probably not be happy it agrees with the flowchart analogs we are using. For now, that is a good sign, though. So, again, Joe is very open and honest about kind of his forecast. And listen, here's the deal, and he kind of brings this up here. And I think I said this early on here in this segment. It's hard enough for us to forecast 7 days in advance, 7 to 8 days. We usually feel pretty good about, 3 days leading up. But then you start kind of getting into, well, these storm complexes aren't even on land yet. They're not getting sampled by models once you get to like days 4, 5, 6, 7. So you start getting a little bit of variability there. So certainly talking months in advance is very difficult because you're talking about things that have not happened. You can look at trends. Obviously, teleconnections play a huge role in that, being a La Nina year. You can look at things that have happened in the past and how that can be a driving force. But I think, while we understand what La Nina and El Nino is, we don't have a firm handle on how it plays a role in a seasonal sense, why it does what it does. How can we not predict 3 years from now that it's going to be a La Nina? These things don't just kind of flow from year to year to year to year, right? Some are going to be stronger than others. Some are going to be considered a strong La Nina. Some are going to be a weak. Some are going to be a strong El Nino. Some are going to be a weak. Some are going to be neutral. Some are going to be a neutral trending toward El Nino. There's so many variables that go into it, and that's what makes it difficult. And I think it's just that understanding, that variability, that unpredictability when it comes to those teleconnections. And that's not the only one. That's called the ENSO, right? But there are other teleconnections that happen in the Arctic, that happen in the Atlantic. There's just so many that just kind of factor in together. And so that's why it's hard to and you can't just solely put a winter forecast solely on teleconnections either. It's what I go back to saying when we talk with Mike Ryan. He takes into account the potential for, you're coming out of a drought or you're coming out of a very wet season. How did that impact in past years? And that's really all you have to go by, is what has happened in the past that was similar. But often it never really plays out that way. Mike's forecasts are usually very, very good, but they will never be 100% accurate, and he'll be the first one to tell you that. And there's been some misses that he's had, even though he's had all the data kind of lining up saying this is, judging by past events, this is what has happened. So it'll be interesting. I highly recommend, if you're interested in that long-range kind of forecasting, check out Joe Bastardi's article here on Weather Bell. It's great. He breaks it down a lot like Mike Ryan does. He breaks down all of the analytical years. He puts them all together first, and then he does each year one by one, both by precip and by temperature. And he does make some interesting points here, because when you get to winter weather forecasting, a lot of it can be all relative. We get sucked in with averages, right? Like where it's going to be above average or below average. But if you ask people here in central Indiana, was this a rough winter? I think a lot of people may say yes. And the main reason why is because we had a whopper of a snow system this last year, right? It was that Valentine's Day, I believe. We had a pretty big storm that brought over a foot of snow in many locations. So that's what people are going to remember. If that would have been our only snow, that would have been half of our snow that we annually see, but people may still would have thought that was a rough winter just because of that day. Schools were closed for several days. Some schools closed for the entire week when that happened, right? So it's all relative. Case in point, he also makes a note, let me find it here, but he makes an excellent note about Texas. Ask the people in Texas here. So a lot of the analogs that he showed, and he did this last year, and I think it ended up being this way truly, that Texas had a warmer than average winter. But again, it's all relative. Ask the people in Texas if they had a rough winter or not. They had that horrific ice storm and the cold that came down for a week that shut down the power grid for much of the state of Texas, and it just ended up being a huge news story, right? But overall, it ended up being a warmer than average winter season in Texas. But that week is what made all the headlines. And if you ask any Texan, you ask them if their winter was awful, they're going to tell you, well, what do you think? You know, did you not read the news? Was your head in the sand? Yes, it was an awful winter. So it's all relative speaking, right? That's why we base everything on averages. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to, obviously we're still a few months away, but I'm looking forward to Mike Ryan's forecast and kind of how he plays this together. But make sure you check out Joe Bastardi's forecast. I think he's got some interesting points. I think it's an incomplete project because you still have to put a lot more together, especially because he brings up tropical developments and stuff like that, and we're only halfway through the season when you're talking hurricane season wise. So make sure you check that out. Again, that's at weatherbell.com. Just look for prelim 2021-2022 winter outlook, and it's a good read. It's an interesting read, whether you agree with it or not. He makes some interesting points there, and hopefully maybe you can learn a lot. All right, we'll have your mid-August forecast. We're going to take you to the end of the month and look ahead to September. That's coming up next year on Weather Weekly. Here's a look at your weather forecast for the week of August 16th. Well, we've got some daily rain chances, if there's any good news here. The problem is we're not getting any triggering mechanism in central Indiana, like a cold front or a massive trough that's going to help squeeze out some rain. There's nothing like that to really bring widespread showers. The other problem is Fred may have been our best chance for kind of getting into a drought-busting type of rain. And we're not in a drought yet, but we are exceptionally dry, no doubt about that. And this time of year, what can usually help break that spell is getting in some tropical moisture from a depression or a tropical storm or a hurricane moving through the Gulf Coast states and eventually feeding into the Midwest. That's happening. It's just going to miss central Indiana. So the best rain chances from Fred are going to be along the Appalachian Mountains, basically. Eastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, and then back into West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee. Those types of places are going to pick up on the rain. For us, it's just isolated storm chances, very pop-up, hit and miss, and more areas are going to be on the miss side. Numbers will hold into the mid-80s, I think, through the end of the work week and then heading into the weekend, but we do have daily rain chances up through what appears to be Saturday. Sunday and then heading into Monday, at least in the next several days, do appear to be dry and warm, with numbers holding into the mid-80s. We're also expecting the humidity to kind of ramp up a little bit as well. In terms of the next 6 to 10 days, looks pretty good chance of above average temperatures and, some good news, above average precipitation taking you over the next 2 weeks, which will take us to the end of the month. Above average temperatures and above average precipitation. We will see if that holds true as we start rolling into the end of August and opening the month of September. That's a look at your forecast here for this week. Hope you can join us here next week for what should be a good podcast here. One, because it's really kind of the last experience I've had with long-form severe weather coverage. So I still have it very fresh in my mind. That will be the August tornado outbreak that happened 5 years ago in Indiana. Many of you may remember that as Kokomo being one of the harder hit areas. We all saw the images of the Starbucks destroyed on the south end of Kokomo. There was a lot of houses damaged. It was a very long day that ended up spinning out dozens of tornadoes across the state. So it was a pretty intense day, and I can give you some of my perspective of how that played out on the air. Of course, we'll bring in my good friend, my coworker, meteorologist Stephen Deanna, so good with a lot of the historical aspects of that day as well. So he will be joining us. Hopefully you can join us next week. We appreciate your time here checking out episode number 27 of Weather Weekly. And while you're here, we always appreciate your feedback. Email us with any ideas, comments, concerns, complaints, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can hit me up on social media as well. Facebook, Marcus Bailey Weather, or Instagram and Twitter @Marcus Bailey. We'd love to hear your feedback. Hope to see you and hear you next week here for episode number 28 of Weather Weekly. And make sure to check out all the other great podcasts we have here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.